Hi everyone, today's video is all about how I'm making wedding confetti from flowers in my garden, and I thought I'd show you what I'm doing just in case you have the opportunity to create wedding confetti for your children or loved ones or friends. It's a really fun project. I've been filming it over time because obviously it takes time. You have to wait for things to dry and stuff like that. But I'm going to show you which plants I chose. I'm going to show you how each different method turned out and what it looks like so that you can get a feel for what kind of wedding confetti you want. And some of it is just really, really easy, and some of it just takes a little bit more time, but none of it is difficult. And in fact, you can make wedding confetti with very little expense whatsoever, and then you've got something wonderful from your garden to be able to share with everybody. There are essentially three different methods that I've used to create the wedding confetti. The first one is by popping them into an oven, and I'll show you how I do that. So we can dry them in an ordinary household oven. The other method we can use is by hanging plants or flowers up to dry. This takes the longest, I suppose, but is really straightforward and probably the most cost effective. And then the third method I've been using is by drying them in silica. And I'll show you how each different method creates a slightly different feel to the confetti, and then you can choose which method you like and just decide what you prefer. You could do a mix and match of all of them. I've kept them separate so that I could show my son and daughter-in-law what each one is like, and then they can choose which one they prefer, and then I will dry more stuff that way, if that makes sense. First thing I'm going to show you is how I dried cherry blossom that I picked from my tree a few weeks ago, and I dried this in the oven, and I think it looks absolutely stunning. I did a little sample and then I sent pictures to my son and daughter-in-law and said, what do you think? And they said yes straight away. So I picked absolutely loads, and I'll show you the process of what I did, how I did it, and that's the next bit of video here. And then afterwards, I'll show you other methods of what I did. So what I will say is that I discovered in this experiment is that if you're drying the entire flower, it's best to pick it when it's quite young, so it's only just opened, because at its freshest, less petals fall off. And if the flower's got quite small petals, once you've desiccated it and it's dried, actually the petals shrink a lot, and then you just end up with basically dust. So it's better if they're all sort of attached as a whole flower, and that's what I've created. Let me show you that. So we've probably got another week of cherry blossom, maybe a bit more, but I can already see petals fall into the ground, and I know that it is going to rain violently tomorrow. That's the weather forecast anyway. So what I want to do, because I really would like to dry some of these cherry blossom because they're beautiful dried, I want to pick them now. So I'm going to pick them today, and there's no way I can pick the whole tree, but I am going to take a significant number of the cherry blossoms off, especially from the dangling branches, because they probably need to be pruned after it's finished flowering anyway. So I'm going to pick the cherry blossom, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to dry it and how beautiful it looks once it's dried. you how I dry the cherry blossom. I did a test last week just to see whether it was possible to do this. So I don't have an air dryer or anything like that. And I suppose what you could do if you're in a warm country is spread them out outside. I mean, they might blow away a bit and let the sun dry them. Or if you've got a dehydrator, you can use that definitely. I'm going to do mine in the oven. I've got a setting in my oven for drying, and I think it sets it to 90 degrees centigrade. So if that so if you want to do it, you don't have a setting, then just set it to 90 degrees. Now, last time I did it for an hour. I'm not sure that an hour is necessary, actually. I will try it and let you know how long I do it for this time. I'm going to show you how I prepare the cherry blossom because I want like a whole flower. So I'll show you how I do it. So some kind of rack is useful so that there is the possibility for air circulation. So we don't want them to be kind of squished down on anything. And then this is what I did last time, and it worked brilliantly. So I took one individual flower and I just cut it off sort of where it gets fattest at the bottom there, and then I just placed it like that. I'm not going to be keeping anything that looks a bit ropey, although you probably can't tell once it's dried, but yeah, I actually didn't use secateurs last time I did this. I just pinched it with my finger. So I just took a bloom like that and I just pinched off sort of the fat part because that's the bit that's going to take the longest to dry. And then I just laid them out on there. So it was definitely easier to do this last week when the blossom was fresher. So that is something that I would recommend. When I'm placing them on the rack, I'm not overlapping them, but I am placing them quite close because as they dry, they're just going to shrink anyway. So it doesn't matter if they're touching, but I wouldn't place them one on top of the other because I want them to all dry evenly, so to speak. So on my oven I have a drying option, and that's what I'm going to use. The dryer, it says that it sets to 90 degrees, like it comes up with a temperature when you set it to drying, and it's set to 90 degrees. That is centigrade on my oven, 90 degrees centigrade. So it's really, really low, and I set it for an hour last time. I had a lot less in there though. So I've set it for an hour. I'm going to check it at about 45 minutes and then see how it's doing. The other thing I would say is do make sure that they are properly dry. So I don't know, mine didn't necessarily need an hour. They possibly could have done with 45 minutes. I may try the next lot on 45 minutes and see how they do. But we really need to make sure that the green bit at the back is properly dry because otherwise your confetti will go mouldy. So these are the 2 tubs of cherry blossom that I dried in the oven. And this one has got slightly more pinky hues because I was picking willy-nilly and I was just choosing any flowers. But I realised quite quickly that actually if we pick the whiter ones on the cherry blossom, so the fresher flowers, they're just less fragile. You can see that a petal has fallen off that one already. So the fresher the flower is, the more likely it is to stay whole. But these are just so light and fluffy, and I just think they're absolutely gorgeous. So much fun as wedding confetti. The next thing I'm going to show you is, well, I won't show you the whole process, but I'll show you the results. So I picked some hydrangea blooms at the end of summer last year when they were still fairly fresh, and then I tied them and hung them up to dry in a dark room. We've got a storeroom we use, but you know, if your garage is dark, or just find a dark space, because they'll retain more colour if you dry them in a dark space. Try not to dry them out in the sunshine, they'll just bleach. I mean, unless you want them bleached. So let me show you that. So these are the dried hydrangeas, and I just, I hung them up like this. So it's really easy, once you've dried the hydrangeas, to just pick off the little flowers. It takes no time at all, and they seem to be staying together really well. So I think that that's really nice because they look really pretty. The other thing I did last year was I gathered up lots of beautiful rose petals, or just picked roses, and I think I also did some tulips and definitely some dahlias, and I just wanted to experiment with how the colours turned out, and whether they were going to be vibrant if I dried them in the oven. And let me show you what that looks like when they've been dried in the oven. And then we can compare it to how they look if you dry them in silica, which is the other thing that I did last year, is I also dried some in silica. So this is the result of everything that I dried in the oven. Let me tip that out. It's got lovely hydrangea flowers in it, and they've got different hues. It's got rose petals. And then these longer ones here, these are dahlias that I dried in the oven. And what I did discover though is that it's really useful if you pick the larger petals from the dahlias, because small petals just shrivel up and they're really, really tiny, and they just sort of turn to dust basically. So you sort of end up with very small bits. But this is everything that was dried in the oven. So it's sort of got this papery sound to it, and the colours go definitely more on the yellowy golden orange side. Obviously there's a bit of green in there, which I think really helps to break it up, and that's from the hydrangeas that I dried separately. I think this is really, really pretty, and if you were to buy wedding confetti, this is what it looks like. So this is stuff that you can just buy online or in stores. This is natural wedding confetti. And then the other thing that I also hung up to dry was some lunaria or honesty. And these are the ones that make sort of little coins. So if you pick your honesty when it's set seed, you get this. And then if you peel back the outer layer and take the seeds off, you get like a really pretty shiny inside, and I'll show you how to do that now. But I have got a whole tub of the little insides, which are sort of this lovely mother of pearl hue to them, and I think they look really pretty as wedding confetti as well. So I'll just pick off one of these. What we have to do is we have to take the outside layers off, and so if you hold the end of it, it's got like a little spiky bit, and then you can just peel off, she says, you can just peel off the outside layer, take the seeds out. There are your seeds for next year. I've picked a really rubbish one to show you, but. And then you're left with this bit here, which is this really sort of shiny pearlescent thing. It's kind of mother of pearlish, and I think it's really pretty. And I've done that to a whole load of lunaria, and it looks like this. And I think that mixed in with confetti would just be really, really pretty. And what I did do was I picked some when it was green, so before it had dried completely, and so you can actually get greeny ones if you wanted a bit more colour. But I think the shininess of this sort of mother of pearl look is much prettier. And then the other thing you can hang up to dry, if you've got any lavender, you can pick your lavender and hang that up to dry too. And then you could sort of just, rub them or brush them, and all the little seed heads fall off. And that, not only does that smell wonderful, but those little seed heads added to confetti, I think, are also really pretty. Try and catch them before they go a bit grey. Mine are a little bit grey, but you can catch them when they're slightly more blue, and then you'll have more of a blue colour if you want that. But I don't think it matters too much what they look like. They're kind of the size of a grain of rice, so that doesn't matter too much. So this is what the lavender looks like, and I think added to wedding confetti, it's just really, really pretty, and it will look gorgeous. I'm keeping them all separate at the moment so that my bride can choose what they want and the mixture that they want. But you can just mix them all together if your bride isn't fussy. But that's why I've got them all separately at the moment. And then the final method I've used is I have dried petals in silica. In some instances this year, I've also tried to dry the whole flower just to see what that looks like. Now, silica is slightly more of a painstaking process, but it's not difficult. It just takes I suppose a little bit more time. You have to be a little bit more gentle, and I do think that once the flowers are dry, they are a little bit more fragile than if you dry them in the oven. They just feel more, brittle's not the right word because they're so delicate, but I do think they're more fragile, but they retain their colour so well, and they're really light and airy. So yeah, that's definitely something else you can do, and I have done that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I did that, and then how the process for taking them out of the silica, which is again a little bit more painstaking than if you put something in the oven, but it does give a completely different feel. So let me show you that. So these are the flowers that I've chosen. So I've got 2 of the Madame Alfred Carrier roses. I mean, look how enormous these are. They're literally the size of my hand. And I'm not going to dry these whole. I'm going to take the petals apart and dry them separately. Then I've got some of this gorgeous clematis here. It's a pale pink clematis. And again, I'm just going to dry those just with the petals. But this is how this clematis looks. Ever so pretty. And then I've got various different aquilejas. So I've got a lot of blue. There's blue with white, just blue. There's some double blue. There's some slightly purple. These are all self-seeded. So none of these are particular varieties. Then I've got some gorgeous wallflower. I think this is Winter's Orchid or something like that. I'll put the name up on the screen. But it goes through from red to it fades to more sort of orangey. And my daughter-in-law really likes oranges and things like that, so I've included some of that. She also likes blue, that's why blue is in there. And then we've got some pale pink aquilegia, and I've got one of the double pink aquilegias. Now with the aquilegias, I'm going to try to dry them whole, but I will be cutting the pollen out of the centre because we don't want pollen going all over everything. And then what we need is a container with a lid. So you need to be able to keep it shut so that the silica can do its work. And then I'm just literally going to layer them in here and then cover with a bit more silica and just make more and more layers. I'm hoping I can get this whole tray done in one fell swoop. And the reason I've put it on a tray here is because the silica makes a real mess and ends up all over the floor. I'm probably, going to make a mess anyway, but it's got little dots in the silica because I've used this before, so that's why it just looks a little bit dotty. So I'm going to start with the wallflowers because I like to put the darker colours at the bottom just in case there's sort of any bleeding. And I'm just going to place them in the silica. And we don't want them touching, so just sort of space them out. What I'm doing is I'm pushing this, is that the calyx? I'm not sure what that is, but I'm pushing the back of it into the silica so that they lie flat. I just think they'll dry better that way. And I tend to keep those bits on the back of them because that holds the flower together and then all the petals don't fall apart. If you take that bit off, then the petals will start falling apart. And it's handy to have like a little chopstick to arrange them if that's what you want to do. And then with the Aquilegia, I think what I'm going to try to do is to cut the pollen out like that. So I'm just sort of cutting the stamens off. Once we've done one layer, we want to sprinkle some silica on top, and I try to do it quite gently so that everything doesn't sort of fold and collapse in on itself. I can see a few ants in there that are going to get dried. So with the multi-layered flowers, you kind of want to get the silica in between all the layers, which is why I've made sure that they're sort of sitting upright. And then I'm going to do the roses, and with the roses it's literally a matter of just taking the petals off. Oh, flipping aphids. Aphids everywhere. Anyone else having that problem? A lot of people are saying it's because we've had such dry weather. And I'm not worrying whether the petals are absolutely perfect. It's just wedding confetti. Nobody's going to be scrutinising every individual petal. So I'm just placing all of them in here. So I've just had a brainwave, and I run outside to pick some of the bleeding hearts, which are fading now. It's sort of the end of the season, but bleeding hearts are so pretty, and I'm hoping that these will also dry really beautifully. They're so cute. So again, I'm just going to gently take them off the stem. If these dry well, it's going to be amazing wedding confetti. They're kind of double-sided and quite thick, so I'm not sure how they'll dry. They should dry. There's no reason why they wouldn't. And then we wait for 3 to 8 days, and I have got a few flowers left, and I've got a little bit of silica, so I may just do another small tub. But that's it for today. All done. So let's open this box and see how everything's doing. Now I always find that a little chopstick or something is really useful to sort of release everything. And I have had a check to make sure that everything's dry, but I'm most interested to see how these have come out. Look at that, it's so cute. It's so pretty. Let me take a few out and we'll have a look at them. Okay, so the results of my experiment, the rose petals dry beautifully, but they are fragile, so they are going to break. But they dried really nicely. I love the bleeding hearts. They came out really well. I think they're so pretty, and I'm really glad I did those. In fact, I'm going to try to see whether I've got any more bleeding heart flowers left, and I'll do some more. The clematis is just too fragile, so most of the clematis petals broke. I think they were just too thin, so you're better off with a thicker rose petal. They are definitely more robust, and in fact the outer rose petals dried better than some of the inner ones, which I guess are more fragile. And then with the Aquilegia, Granny's bonnets, columbine, these have dried really nicely, and they have dried as lovely flowers, and I'm really glad because now I've got some blue, and that's definitely something that my daughter-in-law wants as part of her wedding. And so they've dried really nicely, but most of them have, or a lot of them have actually broken apart. But actually, I think the dash of blue petals is still really sweet. So I'm not too upset they've broken apart. It's quite nice that some of them are whole, and then we can have those. But generally speaking, those went well. The only thing that was an absolute disaster is the wallflowers. So the orange wallflowers have turned into a dark brown. They are horrible, just not appealing at all. I mean, the shape's really nice, but I would definitely go with a lighter coloured wallflower, and I wouldn't bother trying to dry the orange ones unless you want brown, which is fine. But those are not going to be part of it. Oh, look, I dried a snail. So that's this is the result of what I've just done. So the ones that you saw me drying, and then I'm going to show you the ones that I did last summer. So I did all of these last summer, and this is what they look like. So actually they have faded a little bit, although these are probably lighter. So I think that is a Scabiosa Fama Blue. And then a lot of these are dahlias, so with the yellow at the bottom there. I was drying dahlias, and the pink dahlias have dried quite nicely. But you can see that it's just a very much lighter, different texture. And I think to be able to throw this type of confetti, you need something weightier. So something like the lavender will help it throw better, because otherwise, with stuff that's dried in silica, I think because it's so light and fragile, it just might not throw very well. Whereas the stuff that's dried in the oven is just more weighty and will throw better, if that makes any sense. And using the silica, not only do you have to buy the silica, so it's more expensive, but it is so time consuming to take it out of the silica really carefully, and then to shake off all the silica to make sure there isn't any silica stuck to it. It's just fiddly. The results of my experiment, basically hanging things up to dry, by far and away the easiest way to dry flowers, but not everything is going to dry really well. But actually, I mean, you could dry ranunculus or zinnias, depends what time of year it is. You could even dry things like eucalyptus leaves or artemisia, something like that. That would add something nice to confetti. I think hanging things up to dry is definitely easier, and if you do it in a dark room, they'll retain more of the colour. Drying them in the oven works really well and is fast, and you're done. And I quite enjoy the process of just laying them all out, putting them in the oven, taking them all out again, putting them in a box, and they're done. So that's definitely the quickest way. They do have more of a sort of amber, yellowy hue to them, but that's not a bad thing, and you definitely still get colours, you know, pale green, some pinks and purples in there, but actually it just looks like ordinary confetti to me. And I will try drying some darker coloured things in the oven and see how that goes. And then the silica, obviously we have to buy the silica, and then we've got to lay them very carefully in the silica, wait a few days, and then take them out really carefully. And I just don't think they make quite such a good confetti because they're not heavy. I am going to add lavender to it because I think it's going to help it to throw better with any luck. But I think like if it's a breezy day, it's going to be quite difficult to throw anything that was dried in the silica. So my daughter-in-law may just decide that she wants to mix them all up together, which is absolutely fine. I've kept them separate for now, and so we can do a mix and match. Anyway, I really hope this has been interesting, useful, if you ever want to make confetti for your loved ones or your friends, something nice from your garden. I think it's a really fun thing to do. It's a nice sort of garden craft, and I really enjoy it. I've loved doing this, and I can't wait to do some more. I'm probably not going to do the silica again. I'll check with my daughter-in-law just to make sure she's understands, I think, what the problems are going to be on the day using that very light, airy confetti. It just might not land on her at all. It might just land on the person who's throwing it. Anyway, I hope it's been fun. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.